The great hall of elders fell silent as the weight of Alpha King Darien Vexor's words pressed down on Vania Soren. She had failed the sacred fertility trial, and in front of every noble wolf in the kingdom, he cast her aside, his voice cold as ice. "You are barren," he declared, "and unworthy to be my Luna." The words cut through her like a blade, but she knew they were only half the truth. Because what Darien didn't know, what no one knew, was that within her, two tiny hearts beat in time with her own, his heirs, his future, but would the kingdom ever accept them? Vania stood in the center of the hall, the hum of whispers thick in the air. Every noble-born wolf watched her with cruel fascination, eyes dissecting her like a specimen. She trembled, but not from fear. No, it was from the weight of the lie they all believed. She was not barren. She carried the kingdom's future within her, two hearts that beat stronger with each passing moment. And yet, none of them could see that. Darien, the man she had loved, the man she thought would be her forever, had cast her aside like a failed experiment, as if her worth could be reduced to the emptiness of her womb. But he had been wrong. She was more than the broken Luna they saw in her. The moon goddess had whispered to her, and Vania knew that the path ahead would be one of danger, heartache, and power beyond her understanding. But no matter the cost, she would protect her children. She would make sure they survived, even if it meant defying Darien himself. As Vania turned and left the great hall, the weight of her rejection still fresh on her shoulders, she couldn't stop the flicker of hope that burned deep within her. The moon goddess had not abandoned her, and neither would she abandon the twins. But first, she had to leave Northridge, the only home she had ever known. It was the only way to survive, to shield the heirs Darien couldn't see. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with danger. But she would do it, for them, for her children. Vania's fate has just begun, and the kingdom will never be the same. Will she survive the trials ahead? What happens when she faces the Alpha King once more? The truth about the Moonborn is closer than ever. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a moment of this heart-pounding journey. The storm is coming, and it's going to change everything. Comment: I stand with Vania, if you believe her children will bring the future the kingdom deserves. Vania didn't look back as she left the gates of Northridge behind. The weight of her rejection still lingered, but she knew she had to keep moving. Her heart thudded with a mixture of fear and resolve. Fear of the unknown and the dangers that lay ahead, and resolve because there was no turning back now. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the bitter scent of pine and earth as the moonlight filtered through the dense canopy above. Vania's steps were quick, her breath sharp as she pushed forward, the night wrapping around her like a cloak. The kingdom she had once called home felt miles away already, though she hadn't traveled far, but Northridge was no longer a safe place for her. Not after Darien's betrayal. Her fingers brushed her abdomen, feeling the gentle stir of life within her. The twins, they had to be protected, and no one else would do it, not the pack, not the king, just her. Vania had always known she was meant for something more, but now she understood the gravity of that destiny. She was no longer just the Luna, she was the mother of prophecy. Her footsteps quickened as the night deepened. The forest was wild and untamed, much like the future she faced. She'd heard whispers of the borderlands, an untamed stretch of wilderness between kingdoms, where outcasts, rogues, and those who didn't fit the system made their homes. It was a place of refuge for the desperate, but also a place of danger. The people who lived there had no loyalty, no allegiances. Vania would have to rely on her instincts, on her strength. The moon above cast a pale light on the ground ahead, illuminating a narrow trail that seemed to disappear into the unknown. A path she'd never traveled, yet somehow felt drawn to. A sudden rustling to her left made her freeze. Her senses, heightened by the bond she once shared with Darien, were still sharp despite everything. She wasn't alone. The forest seemed to hold its breath, and Vania felt it too, the air thick with tension. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving like a predator, its eyes glowing in the dim light. She instinctively reached for the knife at her side, her only weapon, but the figure didn't approach with hostility. It was a woman, wild, untamed, and feral. Her clothes were ragged, her hair tangled like vines, and her yellow eyes glimmered with the unmistakable glint of a rogue. She sniffed the air, her gaze flickering to Vania's swollen belly. "Well, well," the woman rasped, her voice gravelly from years of surviving in the wild. "What do we have here? A Luna lost in the woods, or a much bigger prize?" Vania's heart skipped a beat, but she stood her ground. "I don't want trouble," she said quietly, her hand tightening around the knife's hilt. The rogue chuckled darkly. "Trouble's all there is out here, princess, and you," she tilted her head, sniffing the air again, "you smell different, almost like—" Vania's pulse quickened as the woman's eyes narrowed. "Like the one they're talking about in the borderlands, the one they call the Barren Luna." Vania stiffened, her breath catching in her throat. "I'm not barren," she said firmly, her voice low, "and you've mistaken me for someone else." The rogue's lips curled into a cruel smile. "No mistake. I know exactly who you are." She took a step closer, eyes glinting with malicious intent. "You're the Luna who's carrying the king's heirs, aren't you? The one everyone thought couldn't bear children." She sneered. "I knew it." Vania instinctively placed a hand over her stomach, feeling the tiny life growing inside her, her children who would one day shape the future of Northridge. But for now, they were vulnerable. Her heart pounded as the rogue took another step forward. "I'm not going to hurt you," the woman said, but Vania wasn't so sure. "But I've heard the stories. You're the last hope for the kingdom, aren't you? The twins will either save Northridge or destroy it. And I've heard rumors about what's coming for you." The rogue's tone shifted, becoming more ominous. "You've made powerful enemies already, Luna, and I'm not the only one who knows you're here." Vania's heart raced as the rogue stepped back, her eyes flashing with amusement. "There's a lot more out here than you think, and there are those who'd rather see you dead than see your prophecy fulfilled." Just then, a sharp noise echoed through the trees, a growl. Vania spun around, her senses on high alert. More figures emerged from the shadows, surrounding her in a loose circle. They were rogues, feral wolves who had lost their humanity, and with it, their morality. The rogue woman stepped aside, a wicked smile on her face. "You've got the king's blood in you, Luna, and that's worth a lot more than you know. These wolves aren't going to let you walk out of here without a price." Vania gripped her knife tighter. She couldn't fight them all, not without her wolf. The rogue lunged. Vania's time in the borderlands had turned her into something she never thought she'd become, a survivor. Days had bled into weeks, and with each passing moment, her strength had grown, both physically and spiritually. The twins inside her had become more than just children. They were power. Every flicker of silver light that radiated from her hands, every surge of strength in her limbs, reminded her of the legacy she carried. But as the weeks stretched on, a gnawing feeling had taken root within her. Something was calling her back. A pull, faint but undeniable, whispered that it was time to return, to Northridge. She had spent so many nights wondering if she was wrong. If the kingdom she had once called home was truly lost, if there was still a chance for her children and her people. But her decision had been made long ago. She would return, not for Darien, not for herself, but for the future, for the twins who would someday shape Northridge's destiny. As Vania stood at the edge of the dense forest, looking toward the distant broken city she had once loved, the weight of her decision settled on her shoulders. The journey ahead would not be easy. She had no allies, and the enemy she feared the most, Darien, her former mate, was still seated on the throne. The very throne that belonged to their children now. Yet despite the chaos and danger that loomed ahead, Vania did not hesitate. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the tiny lives moving inside her, and whispered softly to them, "This is for you." The road to Northridge was treacherous. Every step she took seemed to echo with the ghosts of her past. The path was overgrown, once well-traveled roads now forgotten by time, haunted by those who had vanished or perished in the wake of the curse that had followed her rejection. The forest, once a place of sanctuary, now felt like a world that had turned its back on her. But with each step forward, the memories of her time in Northridge came flooding back. The grand palace where she had stood as Luna, proud and confident beside Darien, dreaming of a future filled with love and power. Those dreams had shattered the night he cast her out, calling her Barren. She could still hear his voice, cold and dismissive, still feel the sting of his rejection, but she wasn't the broken Luna anymore. The woman who walked toward Northridge now was different. She had been forged in pain, shaped by the betrayal and molded by the power growing within her. The twins were more than just heirs. They were her strength, her future. She would not let anyone take them from her, not Darien, not the kingdom, and not the treacherous nobles who still whispered about her failure. As Vania approached the outskirts of Northridge, her heart began to pound. The city that had once been full of life now looked barren, its grand streets cracked, its once beautiful gardens wilting under the weight of neglect. There was no sound in the air, no laughter or joy, just the oppressive silence of a city on the brink of collapse. Her eyes flicked toward the distant castle on the hill, its white towers dimmed by time and decay. The once proud palace now seemed like a ghost of its former glory, hollow and empty. Vania felt a pang in her chest, a mixture of anger, loss, and determination. This was her home, or at least it had been. She could feel Darien's presence before she saw him. It was a strange thing, the bond they shared, even now, broken though it was. There was an echo of it in her chest, a hollow pulse that reminded her that he was close. He had always been close. And as she approached the palace gates, she could sense the weight of his presence, like a shadow hanging over the city. The guards were different now, younger, more wary, their eyes flicking nervously as they watched her approach. When they saw her, they froze, a mix of recognition and confusion flickering in their expressions. Vania could see the doubt in their eyes, doubt that had not been there before. She had once been the Luna, the queen of their world. Now she was a ghost, a broken thing, but still she stood tall, her chin raised, and with one swift motion she made her way through the gates. The tension inside the palace was palpable. Vania walked through the grand halls of the castle, her footsteps echoing through the silence. The once gleaming marble floors were cracked and dirty, the walls faded and worn. It was as though the entire kingdom had withered since her departure, as if her absence had been the catalyst for the downfall of everything she had known. She reached the throne room, where the great throne, Darien's throne, stood waiting, empty. The air in the room was thick with the weight of history, and she could feel it pressing in on her, suffocating her. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. Darien's voice broke the silence. "Vania," he said, his tone strained. She could feel the weight of his gaze before she even saw him. He was seated on the throne, but the man she saw now was not the proud, powerful Alpha King she had once known. He was a shadow of himself, pale and drawn, his once vibrant eyes dimmed by illness. The kingdom was dying, and Darien too was dying. The curse had taken hold of him, just as the moon goddess had warned. He had rejected the Luna he was fated to, and now the price was being paid. Vania stepped forward, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "I've come back, Darien, but not for you, not for the kingdom you destroyed with your pride. I've come back for them." She placed a hand on her belly, her silver light flickering around her fingers. The twins. They were his heirs, his future, and he had no idea what he had cast away. Darien's face twisted with disbelief. "No," his voice cracked. "Not my children. You lost that right," Vania interrupted coldly. "When you rejected me, when you humiliated me in front of your court, when you let your pride destroy everything." The tension in the room grew thick, and for a moment they both stood there, staring at each other across the space between them. The silence was broken by the distant sound of thunder. The silence in the throne room was deafening. Vania stood at the heart of the space that once held her dreams, the place where she had envisioned ruling by Darien's side. Now, it felt like a prison, cold and empty, with only shadows to witness the confrontation that would change everything. Darien sat on the throne, his eyes locked on her, but he didn't rise to greet her. His once powerful presence had been reduced to a faint echo, his body weakened by the curse that had taken hold of him. He had cast her aside, thrown her away like something worthless, and now he was paying the price. Vania's gaze hardened as she took a step forward, the pulse of the mate bond still faint within her, but growing stronger with every breath. She could feel him, his pain, his regret, but she wasn't sure if it was enough to repair the broken bond between them. Her heart ached at the thought of what they had lost, but there was no time for sentiment. Her children were growing inside her, and they needed her to be strong. "You shouldn't have come back, Vania." Darien's voice was hoarse, his eyes full of a mixture of regret and something darker. Shame. Not like this. Vania's heart clenched. How many times had she begged him to listen? How many times had she tried to show him the truth, only for him to dismiss her, to call her barren, to tear their bond apart? "I didn't come back for you," she said coldly, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions crashing within her. "I came back for them." She placed a hand over her belly, feeling the unmistakable flutter of the twins, the two lives she carried inside her. Darien's heirs, his future, his blood. Darien flinched at the mention of the twins, his eyes flashing with pain and disbelief. "You're carrying my children." The words felt foreign, coming from him, as if he still couldn't believe it. Vania nodded, her silver light beginning to pulse around her fingertips, a sign of the power that now flowed through her children. "Yes, your children. The ones you called a curse. The ones you abandoned." He looked away, his gaze falling to the floor as if the weight of his guilt was too much to bear. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I couldn't." "You didn't know," Vania interrupted, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "You didn't know because you refused to see the truth. You were too blinded by your pride to listen. I tried to tell you. I begged you to listen to me, but you wouldn't. You couldn't see the life growing inside me because you didn't want to." Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had cried enough. The time for sorrow had passed. Now was the time for action, for vengeance, for justice. "Do you know what it felt like?" Vania's voice cracked as she took another step forward, her fists clenched at her sides. "To be cast out? To be thrown away like trash? I gave you everything, Darien. I trusted you, and you—" She swallowed, the pain of those memories cutting through her like a wound. "You tore everything apart." For a moment, there was only the sound of their breathing, the silence thick with the weight of their shared history. Darien looked at her, his face pale, the agony of his actions etched in every line of his face. He opened his mouth, as if to speak, but no words came out. Finally, Vania spoke again, her voice cold and resolute. "But none of that matters now, not anymore, because I didn't come back to fight for you. I came back to fight for them, for our children, the twins you rejected, the heirs to Northridge." The room seemed to pulse with power as the silver light around Vania intensified, wrapping around her hands like a living force. The kingdom was dying, and Darien's curse was spreading like wildfire, consuming everything in its path. The land itself seemed to weep, the crops failing, the people suffering. The curse had taken root in the kingdom, feeding on the broken mate bond. But the twins, her children, were the key to its destruction. They were the only ones who could break the cycle. "You think I don't feel it?" Darien finally spoke, his voice quiet but filled with an edge of desperation. "I feel it every day. The curse, the punishment, it's eating me alive. The kingdom is withering, and He stopped, the words catching in his throat. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. But I didn't, and now everything's falling apart. Vania stepped closer, the distance between them closing, but her heart was still guarded. The broken bond between them had left scars, wounds too deep to heal overnight. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to hate him for what he had done, for the pain he had caused her. But there was something else there too, a flicker of the love they had once shared, a love that was still there, buried beneath the anger and the betrayal. You can't undo what you've done, Darien, Vania said softly, her voice trembling despite herself. But you can stop the kingdom from falling. You can stop the curse. You have to help me. He looked at her, his eyes filled with guilt and regret, but also something else, something that had been missing for so long. Hope. How? He whispered. The twins, Vania said, her voice low but firm. They are the key to breaking the curse. They will save this kingdom, Darien, but only if we fix what we broke, only if we restore the bond. Darien's face paled. You want me to restore the bond? After everything I did to you? Vania nodded, her heart pounding. It's the only way to save us, to save the kingdom, but it's not just about the kingdom, it's about us, about you and me. She reached out, her hand hovering over his, not touching, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her power. The silver light pulsed between them, faint but undeniable. We can't undo the past, she said softly, her eyes locking with his. But we can start anew. We can rebuild, together. Darien's eyes flickered with a mixture of emotions, pain, regret, and something else. Something like hope. Together, he asked, his voice raw. Yes, Vania replied, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions swirling inside her. But it won't be easy. The kingdom is dying, and so are you. We'll have to fight to survive, and if we do, if we succeed, then maybe, just maybe, we can rebuild what was lost. For a long moment, Darien didn't speak. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers. The faintest spark of the mate bond flickered between them, and for the first time since their rejection, Vania felt the pull of it. It wasn't whole, not yet, but it was enough to give them a chance. I'll do whatever it takes, Darien whispered, his voice filled with determination. I won't fail you again. The days following Vania's return to Northridge were filled with tension. The very air in the palace seemed to crackle with anticipation. The throne room, once a place of power and pride, now felt like a chamber of ghosts. The kingdom was dying, and Darien knew it. The curse, a slow and agonizing poison, had taken root in both his body and the land. Crops were failing, livestock was sickening, the once thriving capital had become a city in mourning, its people hanging on by the thinnest thread of hope. And Darien, the man who had once ruled with unshakable authority, found himself grasping for the very strength he had cast aside when he rejected Vania. Vania stood at the window of their chambers, staring out at the distant city. The view that had once been a symbol of her future now felt like a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. She could see the smoke rising from the town's outskirts, signs of the famine, the decay, the suffering. The kingdom was crumbling, and it was her fault as much as anyone else's. She had abandoned it. She had abandoned him, and now the price was being paid. She turned toward Darien, who stood by the fireplace, his face pale and drawn. He was trying to hide it, his weakness, his suffering, but Vania saw through the facade. She had known him long enough to understand the weight of the curse was wearing him down. He was dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The silence between them had become suffocating, but neither spoke. They were both waiting for something, for anything that might give them hope. Finally, Vania spoke, her voice soft but resolute. You need to rest. Darien's head snapped up, his eyes clouded with pain and frustration. Rest, he repeated bitterly. I can barely keep myself on my feet. The land itself is dying, and there's no magic, no cure that will bring it back. No one can fix this, not me, not you. The kingdom was better off without me. Vania crossed the room in 2 strides, her expression hardening. Don't say that. Her voice was fierce, sharper than she had intended. You're not the only one suffering, Darien. You're not the only one who's lost everything, but that doesn't mean we give up. That doesn't mean we let it all fall apart. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the faintest pulse beneath her fingertips. He was alive, barely, but he was alive, and that meant there was still hope. He didn't pull away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the past hung between them, heavy and thick, but the flicker of the mate bond that still connected them, though fragile, seemed to hum with life, a whisper of what could be. The curse, Darien started, but his voice cracked as he spoke. It's worse than I thought. The healers say there's no hope, that it's too late. They say it's connected to the bond between us, the one I severed. But I don't know how to fix it, Vania. I don't know if we can. She gazed up at him, her eyes full of determination. We can, but it's going to take time. The land is dying, but it's not beyond saving. You and I, we're both broken, but we can fix it. Together. He looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, she saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. But the fear was still there. Fear of failure, fear of what he had already lost, the kingdom, the mate bond, their future. It all felt like it had slipped through his fingers. Vania took a deep breath, pushing aside the anger and hurt that still simmered beneath her skin. The first step is healing the bond. That's the only way to break the curse. The twins, our children, they're the key. We need to restore the bond, Darien. We need to start over. His gaze softened, but doubt still lingered in his eyes. And you think that will work? You think, after everything? Yes, Vania said firmly, her voice unwavering. But it won't be easy. The bond is fractured, and it won't heal overnight. But the twins, they're not just heirs. They're the key to everything. The moon goddess gave them to us for a reason, and we're going to need each other to make this right. Darien reached for her hand, his grip gentle but desperate. And if it doesn't work? If the bond can't be healed? If I can't stop the curse? We'll make it work, she said. We'll find a way. Vania's words were confident, but inside she was uncertain. She wasn't sure how they would heal the bond, or even if it was possible. But what she did know was that they had no other choice. The kingdom was dying, and the land was responding to their pain. She could feel it. The curse was not just a punishment for Darien's actions, but for the kingdom's arrogance, its pride, and its refusal to embrace the truth. The sound of thunder broke the silence. Vania stepped away from Darien, her mind racing. There's no time to waste. We need to act now. The longer we wait, the stronger the curse becomes, and we can't afford to lose any more time. Darien nodded, but his eyes were distant, haunted. Where do we begin? Vania hesitated, then spoke with quiet resolve. We start by restoring the bond. The moon goddess has already shown me the way, but it will take both of us. We'll have to face the darkness, the power of the curse itself, but we have to do it together. If we don't, the kingdom will fall, and the twins, her voice faltered for a moment, but she quickly steadied herself. The twins will never have the future they deserve. Darien's expression shifted, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders like a heavy mantle. I don't deserve their future. I don't deserve your forgiveness. You'll earn it, Vania said. But first, you have to survive this. We both do. The tension between Vania and Darien deepens as they realize the gravity of their situation. The curse is spreading, and the kingdom is in chaos. Together, they must fight to restore the mate bond and break the curse or risk losing everything. Vania sat in the dimly lit chamber, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the map laid out before her. The palace was no longer the vibrant place she remembered. It was a shell, haunted by the mistakes of the past. Even as Darien recovered, slowly, from the curse, the kingdom's wounds ran deep. The people's suffering had intensified, and Vania knew time was running out. They could no longer wait for the curse to break on its own. She had to act, and acting meant building alliances. Outside the palace walls, whispers of her return had spread like wildfire. Vania had expected them. What she hadn't anticipated were the factions forming around her, like vultures circling a dying carcass. The nobles who had once mocked her, calling her Barren, were now wary, some of them fearful, others calculating. It was clear that her return had shifted the power dynamics. Some saw her as the key to salvation, while others feared what the twins could bring. Vania glanced at Darien, who stood by the window, his silhouette framed by the fading light of the setting sun. His expression was grim. The toll of the curse still visible in the shadows beneath his eyes. He had been weakened, both by the curse and by the guilt of his past actions. But Vania could see the determination in his movements now. He wasn't the man he had been when he cast her aside. He was learning, slowly, that redemption was earned, not granted. "I've sent word to the loyalists," Darien said, turning from the window. "Some of the older houses still remember the strength we once had. They'll come, but they'll need assurances. Many are afraid." Vania nodded, her thoughts focused on the task ahead. Fear is the most dangerous weapon they have. If we don't show strength now, we'll lose everything. We'll have to strike a balance. Show them we have the power to lead and the will to restore what was broken. Darien stepped toward the map, his boots clicking softly on the stone floor. "You know the risks. There are those in the council who will never accept you. They'll try to turn the people against you, twist the prophecy to their advantage." Vania's eyes darkened. "I've faced worse. The prophecy might be the key to everything, but it's also a curse, a weapon to be used against us." She paused, glancing at the map. "And we don't have time to wait for them to decide if we're worthy of their trust." Darien's face softened with understanding. "Then, what do you suggest?" Vania traced a finger along the borderlands on the map, where Northridge's influence had once stretched. "I've heard rumors. There are places where the old ways still exist, places outside the kingdom where loyalties run deeper than blood. If we're going to rebuild Northridge, we need more than just the old houses. We need the people, the fighters, the ones who have nothing left to lose." A sharp knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She rose from the map, the tension in her shoulders relaxing just slightly, but her instincts remained sharp. "Enter," Vania called, her voice calm but commanding. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped into the room. It was Finn, the boy she had taken in, the orphan who had become part of her small, growing family. His amber eyes were wide with curiosity, and though he was still young, the events of the past weeks had aged him beyond his years. "Lady Vania," Finn said, bowing his head slightly. "I've been to the training yards. The guards, they're nervous. Some of them say you've returned to claim the throne, that you've come for the Alpha King's position." Vania's eyes flicked to Darien, who remained still, his jaw tightening. It wasn't surprising, but it stung all the same. She had known her return would stir up distrust, but hearing it so plainly from Finn made the reality more palpable. "I didn't come to take anything," Vania said, her voice firm. "I came to rebuild. But there are those who will do everything in their power to stop us. We need to be prepared." Darien stepped forward, placing a hand on Finn's shoulder. "You've done well, Finn, but there's no need for fear. The kingdom is fragile, yes, but it's not beyond saving." Finn nodded, though his unease remained. "The nobles are meeting tomorrow, Lady Vania. Some of them, they don't want you back. They've already whispered about your children, about what the prophecy means. Some say it's too much power in one place." Vania met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "And some say it's the only way to save us." The palace had become a battlefield of whispers, but it was not just the nobles who were afraid. The servants, the guards, everyone who had witnessed the rejection and exile of their Luna, saw Vania now not as the woman who had been cast aside, but as the one who could restore their broken kingdom. Yet, not all of them believed it. Vania looked to Darien, who stood silently beside her. "We can't do this alone. We need those who still believe in us." Darien nodded, his expression filled with resolve. "The kingdom may have turned its back on you, but I haven't. I never will." His voice was steady, strong, one she hadn't heard in him since the night he cast her aside. "But we have to be careful. There are enemies everywhere." The door swung open again, and this time it wasn't just Finn. A small group of loyalists, guards, former advisors entered the room, their faces grim. The loyalty they had once sworn to Darien was not easily broken. They stood by Vania now, not as conquerors, but as leaders of a new path. "Your Highness," one of them said, bowing deeply, "there's news. The kingdom is fractured. There's a faction of nobles, including Lord Magnus Creed, who are plotting in secret. We've intercepted messages suggesting they plan to use the prophecy to rally support against you." Vania's eyes narrowed, and Darien clenched his fists. Lord Magnus Creed. The name sent a jolt through her. He had been the one to cast doubt on her fertility during the fertility trials, the one who had whispered in Darien's ear, feeding his insecurities. "Creed," Vania said slowly. "He's been waiting for this, for my downfall." Finn stepped forward, his eyes wide with fear. "They think the Moonborn will destroy everything. They think it's too much power for one kingdom." Vania's silver light flared slightly around her hands, a reflection of her rising anger. "Then we show them what happens when you underestimate the Moonborn." She turned to Darien, her gaze intense. "We can't allow Creed or anyone else to turn the prophecy against us. We fight this together." Vania and Darien, with the help of their loyalists, begin to form a strategy to confront the growing opposition within the kingdom. Lord Magnus Creed, a significant enemy, is revealed as the mastermind behind many of the kingdom's problems, and the first real conflict for Vania and Darien arises. A political battle for control and survival. The tension in the air had grown palpable, like the electric charge before a storm. Northridge was a kingdom on the brink, torn between the past and the future, between loyalty and rebellion. Vania and Darien stood at the center of it all, trying to pull the fractured pieces of their world back together. But every step forward seemed to be met with a dozen steps backward. Vania stood before the war map spread across the table, her brow furrowed with determination. The loyalists had rallied, guards, advisors, even former noble families who had supported Darien before. But they were outnumbered by those who still followed Lord Magnus Creed and his dangerous ideology. The prophecy of the Moonborn had become both a blessing and a curse, a weapon that would either save the kingdom or tear it apart. "We have no choice," Vania said, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of the decision. "If we don't act now, they'll take everything from us, from the twins." Darien, standing by her side, didn't hesitate. "We strike first. We show them that we're not afraid. We show them that we'll fight to the end." His words, spoken with quiet authority, stirred something inside her, a flicker of hope, but also a deep fear. The kingdom was on the brink of chaos, and everything depended on the fragile thread that still connected her to Darien, the bond that was only half healed. If they failed, the curse would swallow them whole, and Northridge would fall into the hands of those who sought to destroy everything they had built. "Lord Creed will be at the forefront of this battle," Vania continued, her finger tracing the map. "He's already gathering supporters, mercenaries, spies, traitors within the court. His influence runs deep, and he's using fear to manipulate the people. He believes the Moonborn will destroy the kingdom. He doesn't understand what they can do, what they represent." Darien's jaw tightened as he looked at the map, at the positions of the enemy forces. He could feel the weight of his father's legacy pressing down on him, the expectations that had always been placed on him as the Alpha King. But those expectations had been shattered when he cast Vania aside. Now, he was left with nothing but the hope that he could rebuild what was lost, and the stakes had never been higher. "We need allies beyond the palace," Vania said. "We can't win this war alone. We need the warriors, the rogues, the ones who have nothing left to lose, the ones who have been cast out, just like me." Darien's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "But they won't follow you. They follow power. They follow strength. I can't promise you." "I'm not asking for promises," Vania interrupted. "I'm asking for action. The people need a symbol. They need to see that someone cares about them, that someone is willing to fight for their future." The next morning, Vania and Darien set out to meet the outcasts. It wasn't just the nobles who had betrayed them. It was the very people who had watched from the sidelines, too afraid to act, the people who had nothing left to lose. The journey took them to the outskirts of the city, to the borderlands, where the kingdom's influence had long since faded. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and dirt, and the roads were littered with abandoned carts and broken homes. This was a place of survival, not of hope. As they approached a camp nestled deep in the woods, Vania felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. The rogue warriors were known for their fierce independence, but they were also divided. Some had fought for Darien in the past, while others had turned their backs on the kingdom long ago. But now, Vania was determined to change that. The camp came into view, a chaotic mixture of tents, fires, and wary eyes watching them approach. The leader of the group, a tall, muscular woman with a scarred face, stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You come to beg for help?" she asked, her voice gruff and challenging. "What makes you think we'll side with the king who cast us aside, who left us to rot?" Vania stepped forward, meeting the woman's gaze with unwavering strength. "I'm not here to beg," she said, her voice firm. "I'm here to offer you a choice. You can continue hiding in the shadows, waiting for the kingdom to destroy itself, or you can fight for a future. For your children, for our children." The woman studied Vania for a long moment, then glanced at Darien, who stood silently behind her. "And you," she said, her tone laced with bitterness. "What have you to offer? The kingdom is crumbling. You're no different from the others who ruled before. You cast her out. You're not fit to lead." Darien took a step forward, his gaze intense. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm asking for your trust. We don't have time for old grudges. The kingdom is falling, and if we don't unite, we'll all lose." The woman's eyes softened just slightly. "Trust is earned, not given." She crossed her arms. "But I'll listen. I'll hear what you have to say." Vania nodded, stepping to the side to reveal the map she had brought with her. "We need warriors. We need those who can fight, those who understand what it means to lose everything. There's no time left. Lord Magnus Creed is already planning his next move. He believes he can use the prophecy against us. But what he doesn't know is that we have something he'll never understand. The twins." The woman's gaze flickered to the map, then back to Vania. "The Moonborn," she whispered. "You think they can save us?" Vania's eyes were steady. "I don't think. I know." Vania and Darien begin to build a coalition of the outcasts, rogues, and loyalists who are willing to fight for the future of Northridge. As they face the growing threat from Lord Magnus Creed and his supporters, the tension between the different factions becomes palpable, and Vania realizes that gaining the trust of those who have been abandoned is their only hope. The wind howled through the corridors of the palace, rattling the windows and making the small walls groan with age. The kingdom, already on the brink of collapse, seemed to feel the weight of the curse more than ever. Crops had failed, the people had grown restless, and Darien's health continued to deteriorate under the curse's relentless grip. But Vania could feel it now, as clear as the silver light flickering from her hands. The time had come to heal what had been broken. Tonight, the moon goddess's presence was stronger than ever. Vania stood in the center of the grand chamber, Darien kneeling before her, his head bowed in reverence. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, the tension of their past and the uncertainty of their future swirling in a fragile balance. The curse that had begun the moment Darien had cast her aside was still wreaking havoc on the kingdom, but now, after everything, the possibility of healing was within reach. "We don't have much time," Vania said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. The silver light around her intensified, shimmering like a living entity. "The longer we wait, the stronger the curse grows. The kingdom can't survive it much longer." Darien lifted his head, his eyes full of pain but also resolve. "I know. I've known for a while now." His voice was rough, worn from weeks of suffering. "But Vania, how? How do we fix something that's been broken for so long?" Vania's heart ached for him. He had always been the ruler, the one who held power over the kingdom, and now he was a man consumed by guilt and fear that he might not be able to save them, not after everything he had done. But Vania knew something he didn't. She had seen the truth of the prophecy. The twins were more than just heirs. They were the key to everything. The bond between Darien and herself had been shattered, but the twins, her children, could restore it. They were the bridge between what had been lost and what could still be saved. "You already know the answer," she said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We restore the bond." Darien's eyes flickered with doubt, but he nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The mate bond had been severed when he rejected her, a break that had torn them both apart. But the twins, his children, were the key to healing that fracture. The power they carried inside her was stronger than anything they had faced before. Vania took a deep breath, gathering her strength. "We can't do this alone," she said. "It will take both of us, and it will take the power of the twins. Together, we can heal the bond. Together, we can end this curse." Darien stepped forward, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for hers. "I don't deserve this," he whispered, his voice filled with guilt. "I don't deserve a second chance. Not after what I did." Vania looked at him, her heart heavy with the memory of his rejection. But she also understood the depth of his pain. He was lost, struggling to redeem himself, but the one thing he couldn't see was that he had never been beyond saving, not for her, and not for their children. "You do deserve it," she said firmly. "We both do. This curse has ravaged us, but it doesn't define us. It's our love, our connection, that can heal the kingdom, and it starts here." Vania closed her eyes, letting the silver light flow through her, centering her thoughts, her focus. She could feel the twins inside her, their energy building, a force greater than anything she had ever experienced. The bond between her and Darien had been shattered, but now, with the power of their children, they could rebuild it. She could feel it, tiny threads of the mate bond stirring faintly within her, like a distant whisper. The room seemed to shift around them, the air thick with power. Vania felt a warmth growing in her chest, a pulse that matched the beating of her heart. She could feel Darien's presence next to her, his energy a steady grounding force. Together, they began to pull on the thread of the bond, each tug an echo of the love they had shared once before, and the love they could still share now. The process was painful. Vania felt the edges of the broken bond searing into her soul, the memories of rejection, of betrayal, threatening to overwhelm her. But she pushed through it, focusing on the present, on the twins inside her, on Darien. Her hands trembled as she reached out to him, her silver light pulsing with intensity. Darien took her hands in his eyes locked onto hers. He had to believe. He had to trust that this healing was possible. The light between them flared, brighter and more intense than anything they had ever felt. The bond stretched, wavered, then began to heal. For a brief moment, Vania could feel the rush of emotions flooding her. Anger, regret, longing, hope. Everything she had kept buried, everything she had carried in silence, surged through her. But now, it was different. The power was changing it, transforming it. The curse fought back. As the bond began to heal, Vania could feel the weight of the curse trying to pull them apart, trying to tear them back into the darkness. She gritted her teeth, pulling harder, feeling the pressure building inside her. The twins responded, their presence growing stronger, their power surging to protect her. Darien's voice, strained with effort, broke through the chaos. "Vania, stay with me. We can do this. We have to." The pressure intensified, the silver light flickering between them like a storm on the horizon. And then, finally, it happened. The bond snapped into place. A burst of light filled the room, so bright it was almost blinding. The curse that had poisoned their connection, that had torn their bond apart, shattered. The darkness receded, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Vania felt the weight of Darien's presence next to her again. Not as the king who had rejected her, but as her mate, the one she had always loved, the one she had always believed in. The light faded slowly, leaving behind a sense of peace, of completion. The curse was broken. The bond was restored. And for the first time in weeks, Darien breathed in deeply, his shoulders sagging with relief. Vania stepped back, her hands still trembling, but a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "It's done." Darien looked at her, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen in so long. Hope. "We did it," he whispered. Vania nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "Yes, now we can save the kingdom." The mate bond between Vania and Darien is restored, breaking the curse that has ravaged the kingdom. With the power of their children, the prophecy begins to unfold, and their love is renewed. The kingdom now has a chance to heal, but the fight is far from over. The moon hung high above the kingdom, its silvery glow casting an ethereal light over the land. It was a rare sight, a moment of clarity amidst the chaos that had gripped Northridge for so long. And yet, as Vania gazed out at the horizon, her heart was heavy with the weight of the future. The battle was far from over, but the curse had been broken. The bond between her and Darien had been restored, and the kingdom, slowly but surely, was beginning to heal, but there was more to come. The Moonborn, her children, were not just heirs to the throne. They were the key to a prophecy that had been whispered through the ages. The ones who would either restore or destroy everything, and they were coming. The twins were growing stronger each day. Vania could feel them inside her, their presence a constant, powerful force. They were the future of Northridge, the salvation or destruction of the kingdom, and every step she took now was one that would lead them toward their destiny. The air inside the palace was thick with anticipation. Vania stood in the center of the war room, her hands resting protectively over her belly. The loyalists had rallied, and the forces she had gathered were preparing for the final push. But Vania knew that the true battle wasn't going to be fought with swords and shields. It was going to be fought with the power of the prophecy and the power of her children. Darien entered the room, his face somber but determined. He had recovered, his strength returning with the restoration of their bond, but the weight of the kingdom's future still hung heavily on his shoulders. "We're ready," he said, his voice steady but filled with an edge of urgency. "Creed won't back down. He knows we're coming. He's gathered his forces. We'll need to act quickly if we're going to stop him." Vania nodded, her mind racing. "I know, but we can't just fight him. We need to break the chains that bind this kingdom. We need to show the people the truth. The prophecy isn't a curse, it's our salvation." Darien's brow furrowed in confusion. "The prophecy? You think the people will believe it?" "They don't have a choice," Vania replied, her voice quiet but filled with unwavering conviction. "The prophecy is already unfolding. The twins are more than just our heirs. They are the key to everything. They will bring change to the kingdom, but they can't do it alone. They need us, they need the people, and we need to unite." Her words hung in the air, a promise and a challenge all in one. Darien could feel the weight of it. He had failed once before, but this time he wasn't going to let pride or fear stand in the way of their future. "They will follow you, Vania," Darien said, his voice softer now, "not because of the prophecy, but because of who you are. You've always been more than just the Luna. You've always been the strength this kingdom needs." Vania met his gaze, her eyes filled with emotion. "We both have a part to play. This kingdom is ours. The prophecy is ours." The battle came swiftly. Lord Magnus Creed had underestimated the power of Vania's return. He had gathered his supporters in the heart of the kingdom, determined to use the prophecy as a weapon to tear them apart. But he had failed to see what Vania had known all along. The Moonborn weren't just a threat. They were a force of nature. As Vania and Darien led their forces into the heart of Northridge, the city seemed to hold its breath. The people, the nobles, the soldiers, all waited for the final confrontation, but they weren't waiting for a king or a queen. They were waiting for the Moonborn. The twins had already begun to stir, their power awakening in time with the rising tension. Vania could feel them inside her, the faintest echo of their power pulsing beneath her skin. They were ready. She was ready. In the throne room, the final battle unfolded. Creed was there, his supporters lined up behind him. His eyes glinted with fear and greed, a deadly combination. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered. "You think you can just walk in here and take back what's mine?" Vania stepped forward, her silver light flaring around her hands. Her eyes locked on Creed with unwavering focus. "It was never yours to begin with," she said coldly. "The throne was always meant for the true heirs, the Moonborn, and they're here now." At her words, the power inside her surged, and the light around her grew brighter. Creed's supporters faltered, fear flickering in their eyes as they realized the truth of what she was saying. The power of the Moonborn was undeniable. Darien stood at her side, his presence a steady force as he looked at their enemies. "The kingdom belongs to the people," he said, his voice carrying through the room with authority. "Not to those who seek to control it, not to those who would use fear to manipulate others." The battle didn't last long. Creed's forces crumbled under the weight of Vania's power, their resistance fading as the Moonborn's light grew brighter and brighter, until it consumed the entire room. The power of the prophecy had awakened, and with it came the strength of the kingdom's future. The prophecy of the Moonborn is fulfilled as Vania and Darien restore balance to the kingdom. Creed and his supporters are defeated, and the power of the twins, the true heirs, becomes the kingdom's salvation. The kingdom begins to heal, and the people rally around the new leadership. The Moonborn's destiny has been fulfilled, the kingdom of Northridge is restored, and Vania and Darien begin a new chapter in their reign. The bond between them is unbreakable, and their children, the Moonborn, are the future of Northridge. The sun rose over Northridge, casting a golden light that bathed the kingdom in warmth and hope. The once barren fields were now beginning to show signs of life, the first hints of green breaking through the earth. The kingdom, ravaged by the curse and torn by betrayal, was finally beginning to heal. It was a slow process, but it was progress. Vania stood at the palace balcony, her hands resting gently over her swollen belly. The twins, her children, kicked softly, a constant reminder of the future they would shape. The bond between her and Darien was now unbreakable, stronger than it had ever been, and their love, forged in pain and loss, had been reborn. Together, they had restored Northridge and brought balance to a fractured kingdom. Below, the people of the kingdom were gathering in the central square, their faces filled with hope. The streets, once empty and silent, were now alive with the laughter of children, the bustling of merchants, and the songs of workers returning to their fields. The prophecy of the Moonborn, once feared, had become the kingdom's salvation, The twins, the true heirs of Northridge, had awakened not just their power, but the spirit of the people. Darien stepped out beside her, his hand finding hers. His once silent demeanor had changed. He was no longer the man burdened with the guilt of rejection, but a king reborn, strong, humble, and determined to lead with wisdom. His touch was warm, steady, a promise of what the future would hold. "How does it feel?" he asked softly, his voice filled with wonder. Vania smiled, her heart full. "It feels like the dawn of something new." He glanced down at the crowd, a sense of pride filling his chest. "We've come a long way. I never imagined that we could rebuild what was lost." Vania's eyes met his, and for the first time in years, she saw no regret in his eyes. There was only hope. Hope for their children, hope for their kingdom, hope for a future that was theirs to shape together. "The road ahead won't be easy," Vania said, her voice steady. "But we have each other, and we have the people. We'll rebuild, not just the kingdom, but the trust that was lost." Darien nodded, squeezing her hand. "Together, as we always should have been." The kingdom was changing. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but the true journey was just beginning. The Moonborn, once seen as a threat, had brought a new age to Northridge, a future of hope, unity, and strength. As the first rays of the sun bathed the palace in light, Vania felt a deep sense of peace settle in her heart. The curse was broken, the bond was restored. The twins stirred inside her, their presence a promise of the future they would one day lead. And as she looked out over the kingdom, Vania knew that the legacy they were building would last for generations. This was no longer the kingdom that had rejected her. It was no longer the kingdom that had torn her apart. This was a new kingdom, one built on love, sacrifice, and the strength of the Moonborn. It was a kingdom that would flourish, just as the rising sun promised. End of story.